Hey, good day, everybody, and welcome to your Rouxbe Live event. My name is Eric Wynkoop, and I'm the Director of Culinary Instruction here at Rouxbe, and I'm also one of your chef instructors in the courses, along with the other members of our team here. And in particular, today, I want to welcome you to my office hours. This is your chance to ask a question regarding food and cooking, and it's my chance to do my best to respond to that. Okay. And, if you take a look at your screen, of course, you'll see a number of pre-populated questions from our audience members. And I'd like to mention that if you would like to participate more directly, you're welcome to share your own question or even comment. And to do so, you can go to the dialog box. This is in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. It says Add Question Here, and that'll make its way to the queue. And then the other item I like to mention before I get started is that, on the page you're looking at on the, excuse me, on the right side where you see the questions, you'll also see a heart-shaped icon in each of the question boxes. And if you want a particular question answered sooner than later, you can click on that heart icon and it'll bump it up in priority. Okay. And those are the couple of housekeeping things to touch upon before we jump in. And let's go ahead and get started, since there are indeed a number of questions in the queue. The first one is for Mitch. Good day. Mitch says, hi again. I thoroughly enjoyed your spice presentation from a while back. And for the rest of the audience, this is from a previous live event, and it is archived and accessible to all of you. And to continue here, Mitch says, could you briefly review which spices you use often and how you use them on a day-to-day basis in your family meals? Any spice combinations which you particularly enjoy? Let me mention a couple of things. And what I've got actually in front of me here is our masala dabba, and which means spice box. And this is typical to an Indian kitchen. Just remove the lid. There's an inner lid here. I'll try to do this gently so I don't dump all the spices out. A spoon or two. And I'm not going to tip this a whole lot more, but you can see these small containers in here that have different spices. This one holds 6 of those small containers. And Mitch, let me just start by running through what I have in this container. These masala dabbas are pretty handy for your daily use, your most frequently used spices. And this one includes cumin and coriander, and there's some hing, and also some fenugreek seeds. There's some turmeric powder and black mustard seeds. Now, in addition, in the cupboard, within less than an arm's length away from whoever's doing most of the cooking, will be some black peppercorns and some green cardamom. There's some black cardamom, cloves, and cinnamon sticks. And that probably rounds out. Oh yeah, then we've got a variety or two of whole red chilies and a couple of varieties of red ground chili. And then in the freezer, we have fresh green chilies, or once upon a time fresh. So anyway, those are going to be our most frequent go-tos. Oh, let me also mention, in the fridge, we've got some curry leaves. And so, that might be a dozen or so that I'd mentioned are going to be the most frequently used. In addition, there's probably another, dozen or so, at least, that we might use less frequently. And so, in terms of how we use them, I mean, most of this is going to go into, Indian or Indian inspired sort of preparations. And it might be very simply where um, we might use some oil or not. Let's say we do use oil to start. And it doesn't have to be much. It could just be a teaspoon, couple of teaspoons. Doesn't have to be more than that. Even though you will see more than that used, by some cooks. And whole spices like mustard seed and curry leaves, maybe cumin and coriander will be added to that to bloom. We use this term bloom, and it's one where the flavors of the spices are drawn out, into the oil as they're heated, and the heat sort of opens things up. And then once that oil is flavored, other ingredients are added to the pan. So it could be, onions and tomatoes and garlic and ginger and fresh chilies. And that flavored oil then flavors the rest of of the ingredients. And then you continue to build upon whatever you're making, adding whether it's potatoes or grains or something else. And toward the end of the cooking process, it's common, in the Indian or South Asian kitchen, to add some ground spices. They could be singular, or they could be in a masala blend, just based upon what it is that you're preparing, what flavors you like. Okay, and so that's a basic process. Now, in terms of what combinations we use. There are some common combinations that work, I'll say, along the lines of any regional cuisine. If you take a look at flavor combinations that appear commonly, those are going to be safe combinations to use in your own kitchen, no matter the cuisine that we're talking about here. But, cumin and coriander would be an example of a couple of items that routinely go together. um, uh, uh, Mustard seeds, black mustard seeds, and curry leaves, they go together. You'll find ginger, garlic, chili, fresh chili, that work together in many preparations. And then from there, you might add more or less, or some or not, of um, cloves or green cardamom or black cardamom, for example, black pepper in some form, whether it's in a whole berry form, peppercorn, in other words, or some sort of a crushed or ground form, are very common as well. And so, to begin, I would recommend that, as you make one or two dishes, find a favorite or two, and then just practice with that to get to understand how the flavor of the individual spices play out and how they work in tandem, with the next spice. Um, and then you can make adjustments on your own. If you want less heat, then tone down or even omit, the addition of red chilies or green fresh chilies, while enjoying the flavor of the other spices. And then also, don't be bashful about even considering a boxed or bagged spice blend from the store. If you go to an Indian grocery store, or more broadly speaking, a South Asian grocery store, you'll probably find many spice blends to choose from. And many of these will be, I'll say, designed or formulated for a particular type of preparation, whether it's a fish preparation or a potato preparation or this or that. And so depending on what it is that you might be making, you can try out these different types of masalas. And then from there, if you want, you can start to blend your own at home. And you can look online for specific, recipes, going beyond simply looking at the ingredient list on the back of the box, in other words. Okay. And so hopefully, this approach to using more spices makes sense. And it is I think, a step-by-step sort of a guide here to getting you to use more spices. And I recommend everybody use more spices in their cooking. Let me provide another example here. If I sometimes make a smoothie in the blender, and it could be absolutely any smoothie you want, but or I want, I guess. But I'll always add some spices, and cloves and cardamom and black pepper and turmeric are usually found in whatever it is that I'm blending. And again, you can adjust the quantity based upon how much sort of heat you want to feel after you swallow the food, that aromatic sensation or the more immediate sensation on in the mouth, and even if you're not noticeably picking up on the spice flavors or aromas, know that you are benefiting from the phytonutrients that are present in these foods. And also, please understand that we don't know all the benefits of all the phytonutrients that are in all these plant-based foods that we enjoy, but do know that they are of benefit to you. And spices are a great way, a great source to draw from it to get these into your diet. And so, I will typically go through a day where spices go into absolutely everything that I'm preparing, even in a small dose, in order to get the health benefit of that one or two or three spices that I'm adding. Okay, and so please, all of you, I hope you'll give that a try. Thank you. And you can also see on your screen that a link to a past live event on spices has been posted. Thank you, Patrick. All right, next one is from Alice, who says, how do you feel about Miyoko's Creamery cheese? The ingredients look okay, but how do you feel about using them in a plant-based diet? Yeah, I think Miyoko's creamery items are fine to use, and I think the consumer. So starting with you, Alice, of course, we'll need to look at the ingredient list and see how comfortable you are with that, and how it fits into a plant-based diet. I think number one, it does. Clearly, it is a plant-based item, and I think a pretty good one. In that category of plant-based cheeses. It's going to be all up to you then to moderate that intake. I would say that anything you're enjoying is best to enjoy in moderation. Even the best things for us are not so good if they're out of balance. So do keep that in mind, and pay attention to your body. As you eat certain foods, including, these plant-based cheeses, no matter what they're made of, and notice how you feel as you're eating it. Notice how you feel as you're digesting it. Notice how you feel as you're expelling that food from the other end. All of these phases of our body, our consumption of food is going to be important. And in the end, you're going to be the best judge as to whether that is a comfortable fit for you. Thank you. All right, next question is from Shar. Hello, Shar. Shar says, there's so much discussion about the storage of soy sauce, room temp or refrigerated. What's your take? This is a great question. I think of food storage questions, generally speaking, as interesting questions because there's so many variables. So let's take on this question, Shar, and I will respond to you with soy sauce in mind, but then also food storage more generally. It could be condiments that hang around longer, for example. And that is to say that soy sauce can go in the fridge or at room temp. I think it really depends on what is going on in your in your neck of the woods in terms of the warmth of your house or the climate that you live in. One thing that I find with soy sauce is if it sits out, in particular at room temp for some extended period of time, or I should say in a warm environment for an extended period of time, is that flavors can shift a bit. And I noticed that soy sauce will also evaporate. And that will also cause a change in the flavor profile. And so, in order to maintain some of that freshness, if you happen to live in a hot, humid environment, do consider storing it in the refrigerator. I don't think anything's wrong with that. I'm in a pretty cool environment here in the Willamette Valley of Oregon. Year round, it never gets particularly hot, and certainly not inside the house here. So, we usually keep the soy sauce out, in a small container, easily accessible, or the larger backup, is in the cool pantry just a few steps away. I think either method is going to be fine for for a lot of people. But pay attention to the color concentration, the flavor intensity, even the aroma. As a product sits around for a long time, and again, this could be something other than soy sauce as well. Um, let's see. Yeah, I think that probably answers the soy sauce question here. The other, in terms of where to store it, the other part of this bigger issue is one of buying the appropriate amount relative to your usage rate, so that you don't have food items that hang around too long. And too long means something different for each food item and probably for each person's household because of the variables that we're talking about here. Okay. But if you find that this might be a concern, in other words, how do I store my food? Is the flavor shifting? Then do consider buying the smallest pack size, smallest unit size, and just try to use that product as quickly as you can while it's in its freshest state. Thank you. And the next question is from Svetlana, who says, it's my third jar of tahini I have to throw away. It gets too bitter before I use it. How long can it be stored in the fridge, and can I freeze it? Is almond butter a good substitute for it? Let's see. How long can I store it in the fridge? So, let me share, at least my experience with tahini. And the first thing that comes to mind is that, some sesame seed products, and this is, I guess, goes beyond tahini. This is true of sesame oil as well. But some items can be bitter, or have some noticeable bitterness from the start. While others are very mild or have no, I'll say for most people anyway, no perceptible bitterness. And so, one thing comes to mind, and that is, I'm wondering, Svetlana, if you are one of these super tasters, when it comes to bitterness. In other words, while, most of us out there probably fit, our sensitivity to bitterness, right, fits within, some more common range of variation, there are outliers that are particularly sensitive to bitterness. And I'm wondering if that could be your palate, your sensitivity to this particular taste. Keep that in mind, as you move forward tasting foods. But so, how long can tahini be stored in the fridge? So this is related to the previous question on soy sauce, and many other questions that we received in the past regarding the shelf life of a product. Generally speaking, folks don't do a maximum shelf life on product. There's just too many variables. And when it comes to, a fairly stable product, like tahini, the shift in quality, or we might say the decline in quality, can be very gradual and long. And so where you decide that it's no longer palatable is really an individual decision. It's an individual choice based upon, palate preference ultimately. Okay. So how, I store mine outside of the fridge. And again, I'm in a relatively cool part of the world, right at the 45th parallel. And tahini can last for a few months in the fridge. And it's not because it goes bad for me. It's because I end up eating it and having to replace it. But you might just date your container, put it in the fridge, and then again try to work through it in a say timely fashion before you start to pick up bitterness that's bothersome to you. And once again, you might consider a smaller container. I buy tahini in a gallon-sized jug. It's this big, but you might consider something much smaller that is in alignment with your usage rate. Okay, and can you freeze it? Yes, you can freeze it. It's kind of atypical. But give it a try, and be prepared for tahini separates anyway, so certainly be prepared for some separation of the oil from the other solids, and bring that out to defrost in whatever time is adequate, whether it's 24 hours or more or less, and then stir it sufficiently so it's all even in viscosity again, because even at room temp, the solids will tend to fall to the bottom of the jar. You have an oil slick at the top, and things at the bottom get really, really hard. And so to just keep that mixed, before you use it is going to be the best practice. And then, is almond butter a good substitute? Any of the other nut and seed butters can be a good substitute. It just depends on what you're using it for. If you want to make something in a more traditional fashion that calls for tahini, then no, maybe that's not the best answer. But if you want to just make another version of something, then sure, almond butter can be great. Also note that these different seeds and nuts have different flavors. So, as you use almond butter in place of tahini or, a sesame seed paste, that the flavor of the end product is going to be very different. And so give it a try and see how you like it. That's going to be, the feedback that I give to a lot of cooks, a lot of students that make ingredient substitutions. Give it a try and see how you like it. All right, enjoy. And next one from Anna, who says, why does FOK, Forks Over Knives, use tofu and tempeh sparingly? The quick answer here, Anna, is that the Forks Over Knives folks look at tofu and tempeh as a processed product, and they're more or less processed. It's going to be kind of a subjective call, of course, but that's going to be the short answer. Okay, and I think out of these two here, tempeh goes through some fermentation. Tofu is much more processed, I guess, in a different sort of way. But again, that's the quick answer. And then other than that, it's going to be up to you to see how that fits into your diet. All right. Thank you. Annette says, I'm excited about my new FOK lifestyle. Just wanted to know how to cook beans that taste good and not bland. Well, I think cooking beans that taste good are going to be up to your skill development, your knowledge development around these principles of cooking different staple items, in this case, beans. And, as you move through FOK course, or it could be any of our other courses here at Rouxbe, you're going to start to learn a little bit about, using spices and herbs and also other ingredients, that add flavor. We call these, generally speaking, aromatics. And onions and garlic, and I would lump ginger in there as well, as I mentioned a little bit earlier with Mitch's question. But all these things can add flavor, and there are many, many other ways to get flavor into a pot of beans. I would start out with a recipe, and while here at Rouxbe, our focus is on developing cooking methods and the understanding of these ancillary techniques, we also provide many practice recipes for you to exercise this knowledge and develop your skills. And so practice with recipes around bean cookery And once you understand how to cook beans and cook them thoroughly, don't undercook beans. They don't taste good, they don't feel good on the palate, and they're probably not the best for you either. But once you get to a point where you have a little more confidence, then you can start to adjust recipes and add or omit or reduce the quantity of certain otherwise flavoring or flavorful items. Okay, that's the answer. There's not a single answer, for your question here, but it's a longer-term process of you developing your skills and your knowledge around ingredients and the cooking process of certain foods. Thank you. Next up, from Ingrid. As a chef, how would you say you have learned more to cook? For example, seeing people cooking, getting one technique and one recipe and doing several times, reading about techniques. Excuse me. Let me get a drink here first, Ingrid. So the answer to your question is all of the above, right? Learning takes place in many, many different forms. Certainly as an individual, each of us has a preferred way to learn. Some of us are visual learners. Some of us are, auditory learners. Some of us are kinesthetic. You need to get in there and do it. Ultimately, for most people, if you can combine all of those, then you're going to be the best off, okay, in terms of skill development and knowledge development. Okay, so do I see people cook? Absolutely. Whether it's it used to be on TV, now it's more on a video on my computer, or attending a cooking class. I still attend cooking classes, and it's always for fun and for learning something new. And it could be something I'm familiar with, but I want to see someone else's take on it. Or it could be an introduction to a new regional cuisine. And so seeing people do things is really important to me. I'm a visual learner. Getting one technique and a recipe and doing it several times, absolutely. This is the practice component of your skill development. And everybody is going to benefit from this approach. So, as you happen upon on a method or a technique or a recipe, absolutely, make it several times until you own it, right? And then, in terms of your confidence and your ability to control it, and then start to modify it to best suit your palate or the requirements of your audience. Okay, in other words, changing ingredients or adjusting quantities or ratios as needed. And do I read about techniques? Absolutely. Yeah, I do a lot of reading. I've always enjoyed reading about technical aspects of food, and some people don't really care to dive deeper into cooking in that way, and that's absolutely fine. But it does work for me. I've got rooms are overflowing with books in this house, and I pick them up from time to time and read through a chapter or a couple of pages or paragraphs as needed. And maybe it's a Larousse gastronomique, maybe it's something on food science or something else. But absolutely, reading about techniques I think is very important. And I also like to compare. So I'll pick up books from different authors or go to food blogs by different authors and compare the way that they approach food in order to better understand what are the sort of baseline common aspects of the technique and which are more commonly manipulated, as you're making this particular product or this dish. Okay. And I'll try those out in order to better understand it and figure out what works best for me in my setting based upon my understanding of food and what I'm trying to do. Okay. And so I hope you'll give that a try. It's a wide lens. It's a holistic approach to learning. Thank you. And next up from Nishant. What are your thoughts on South Indian cooking? Wow, that's a wide open, very broad question. I will answer it with a very broad stroke and say that I think it's delicious. I think I'm familiar with probably a pretty small, subset of South Indian cooking. My experience in South India is primarily in Kerala, touring in places like Munnar and Periyar and Kochi and a few other places where I've eaten, I've watched cooks doing their thing over and over. I've taken cooking classes and also have done my share of eating of different types of South Indian foods in restaurants and in people's homes as well. And it is absolutely delicious. Very different style from other regions of India, and highly recommend that to everybody who perhaps is unfamiliar with South Indian regional cuisines. Thank you, Nishant. Next up from Victoria. Hello. I was asked to bring a healthy, kid-friendly dessert to a get-together. Anything you might recommend? One thing that always comes to mind for me first is fruit. Whether it's whole fruit that kids can peel and enjoy on their own, or it could be cut fruit, whether it's just on its own, or it could be mixed up in the form of a salad. It could be dressed very simply, maybe with fresh herbs like basil and mint, for example. There are a couple of recipes that come to mind in our Rouxbe, our recipe repertoire. And a couple of these are chocolate mousse or mousse-based torts. And, these are going to be based on avocado, or they could be based on nuts. And, you might give these a try. If you have access to the recipes, take a look. If not, reach out at support@rouxbe.com, and we can provide links to a couple of examples and see how you like that. And my thought, when you prepare these sort of things, for example, an avocado-based chocolate mousse, that can be presented in different ways. It can, in individual cups, or they can be in a cone, or something else that is fun for kids. But you don't have to mention anything about the avocado base or other ingredients that might sound too healthy, for the consumer. Instead, just market the item as a chocolate mousse, a chocolate pudding, a chocolate pie. And let the children taste it and find that they enjoy it all on their own. Okay, and I would use the same approach for adults too, because not only are children finicky, but so are adults who talk themselves out of perfectly good food, and also talk their kids out of perfectly good food. So don't say anything about what's in it. Just prepare delicious food. Thank you. All right. Next up from Bonita, who says, what advice can you give to reduce anxiety related to all things food? My husband planned, shopped, prepared, cooked, served, cleaned. Proper nutrition has been difficult since my loss, so I joined Rouxbe. Okay. Wow. Let me mention one thing, and that is to consider I'll call it a support group, but just a group, which becomes hopefully a group of friends and folks, that you can share meals with and ideas with, or conversations with, in your area. And there might be something online as well, so it could well be a more dispersed group that you find, but to meet up with folks face to face, provided you're comfortable with that. Can be a nice way to go as well. Otherwise, sharing food, in other words, having, again, a goal or another purpose for the cooking that you do in terms of sharing it, could be a nice way to go. And, again, depending on your situation, right? It could be a neighbor, it could be a friend, a family member, or somebody that you might meet in one of these groups that I alluded to just a moment ago. And, as you start to participate in your own planning and shopping and preparing and cooking and cleanup and all of that, you'll start to develop your own routine and your knowledge will deepen. And we certainly hope that your comfort level will increase, your anxiety will decrease around the all important routine of food preparation and the enjoyment of food. And I wish you all the best, and stay in touch as you move through your Rouxbe course. Thank you. All right, next up, I want to hear your whole story for becoming a personal chef. What would you have done differently? How do you make it lucrative? What marketing did you do to gain clients? So, my experience as a personal chef has been on again and off again during my food career. And I've never done it full time. It's always been something on the side, where, I've done, either cooking in a restaurant or teaching as my mainline activity. I would pick up a gig here and there. I've had like a regular once a week client, Wednesday night dinner, for some period of time, these sorts of things that are very part-time. And, I wouldn't do anything different in terms of my path. Rather, I carved out the path that worked for me and my situation. And I found enjoyment and a little extra pocket money on the side, as I participated, in these personal chefing sort of opportunities. This was certainly after gaining experience cooking professionally. I got into cooking, on a small scale for people as a personal chef. And, how do you make it lucrative? I'm not sure if I'm the best person to ask because it was never my mainline job, but I think you need to cost out the dishes that you're making. In other words, you calculate the cost of each ingredient so you can calculate the portion cost so that you know how much you're spending on the food, and then you will understand how much you should charge for the food in order to cover your expenses. So that's going to be step number one. And that's a very important step. It can be tedious and it can also change, from season to season and even from year to year as prices fluctuate. But it's important that you stay on top of your own food cost in order to create a profitable business, whether it's a full-time business or something on the side. And then in terms of making it lucrative, you got to create delicious food. It needs to look good and it needs to be done efficiently. And you develop these skills and this know-how with experience. And the quickest way to do that is to work professionally for somebody else so that you're doing these sort of things each day and developing the shortcuts and just that deeper knowledge and skill around doing these different things, as cooking methods and all the ancillary techniques that are part of cooking, as well as the knowledge of the seasonal variation of food, the different quality levels of imported foods that we might buy in a jar, like tahini or soy sauce, as we've talked about today, and so on and so forth. And so there's a lot of knowledge that goes into creating a lucrative business, and that knowledge is going to come out of experience. And so I always encourage people to go to work for somebody else for some period of time as you develop your chops, and then branch out on your own. Okay, and in this manner, you're going to make the best food professionally, and then also the safest food. In other words, from a food safety and hygiene perspective, okay, which is super important as well. All right, thank you. All right, next up from Teresa, who says, how do you manage to get nice knife cuts, julienne or large dice, out of wacko-shaped vegetables like really long and thin carrots? Well, Teresa, so you're creating a kind of an exception, maybe, to at least my experience of cutting vegetables. If you have wacko shaped vegetables, then you gotta you gotta go wacko on them, and you're probably not going to get a large dice out of a thin carrot. A large dice, by sort of textbook definition, as we start out on this path, is about a 3/4 inch cube. I've certainly seen many carrots that are smaller than that in diameter, which means you're not going to be able to get a large dice out of that. So keep that in mind. In which case, you'll just need to cut it up as you can. Things that are very long and skinny can be much less, I'll say, efficient when you're trying to create these sort of textbook shapes and sizes. And I'm going to take a bit of a tangent here and put this into some context by saying that if you are doing our assignments or graded assignments, then please look for the produce shape and size that's going to be appropriate to the results that you want to generate. And once you get past our assignments and you get into your routine of daily cooking, feel free to use whatever comes at you out of your garden, from the market, whatever you get, and work with it. Which means that if you get a smaller diameter carrot and you're thinking, wow, I want to make a large cut of some sort, you may just need to adjust it down to a medium-sized dice or a smaller cut in order to fit it into what it is you have, of course, right? That's what we have to do as cooks. And so, I mean, that's the way you manage those things. Don't fret over it. Just sort of run with it and enjoy the process of cooking. What you're going to make in the end should be delicious. And once you get past our graded assignments, then don't worry. You don't have to worry necessarily, so much about the perfection or the size and shape of the knife cuts. We want you to focus on that while you're doing our assignments, because we want to push you to develop your skills, and we want to see at what level you're at. And but once you get beyond that, then you have that understanding to make some adjustments in your daily cooking. Thank you. All right, next question. More than one recipe calls for wine. Is it okay to use de-alcoholized wine? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you or anyone that you're cooking for doesn't consume alcohol for whatever reason, absolutely. I mean, omit the alcohol however you need to. And so, de-alcoholized wine is may be an answer for you. Completely omitting it is an answer for a lot of people, in which case they will, in its place, use perhaps vegetable stock. Sometimes it's apple juice or some other flavorful liquid, as that substitute. Thank you. And the next one is from Maria. And Maria says, how to turn your cooking passion into profit. Can you share 3 ways you can turn your cooking passion into profit? Okay, let me come up with some quick ideas here. If you've got some sort of an idea for a food product, let's say it is a potential retail product, and maybe it's a baked good, maybe it's a jarred or boxed item, then try your hand at the local farmer's market, for a season. Rent a booth, or maybe, I'd say do it for the season. Some longer experiment is probably going to be better in terms of understanding the bigger process here. And then market your item and, see what kind of a response you get. You get to talk to people directly at that point. Okay. It's a stepping stone, to making a profit. Hopefully you can make a profit right away, but it doesn't always work that way. All right. Another way is you got to find an audience. I'm just thinking about ways to find an audience. Maybe you've got a place of worship where you have access to people, or maybe some sort of a other club, a social club, athletic club, where you have access to people, where you can give out samples of what it is that you're making, requesting feedback before you move on to sales again. And the next step could be that farmer's market idea that I just talked about. Okay. Now, if it's a jarred item, okay, then start you're talking to retailers, like grocery stores, and to see if you can get your product into their store and ask them about what that process is. Sometimes it's easier, sometimes it's more challenging depending on the company and their requirements. Okay. And sometimes the requirements are on a volume scale. Can you support X amount of volume on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis? And so you need to be prepared to respond to questions like that in terms of the scale that you're thinking about. Okay. And let's see. Yeah, if you can then move on to talking to food processing companies in your area, folks that might sell their own branded jarred salsa, for example. And I'm suggesting this because it's fairly common for a place like that to have some downtime during the week where they will rent out their bottling line or their processing line to folks like you who have a small business, but it's at a scale that's larger than doing it at home. Let's say you outgrew your garage operation and you need some professional equipment. You might be able to piggyback on an existing company's equipment and rent it out for several hours, one day a week or twice a month, for example. Okay, so these are all possibilities. Another thing to consider is to attend one of these specialty food shows. And there's a specialty food show in New York. I think there's one in San Francisco as well. These are big ones where you can get your product in front of potential buyers from retail chains, from restaurants, and so on and so forth. And so these are some ideas on exposure. Okay, that's going to be the big challenge when you sell a product. Thank you. All right, next question from Anna, who says, what adjustments are necessary to change the cooking method from oven to pressure cooker for roasted garlic and onion butter? Okay, let me get a little drink here. Yes, so in the oven method, as we braise these big chunks of onion, some color is developed, right, as the liquid reduces, as the solids are exposed to the heat of the oven. The color adds some visual interest. It also adds some flavor, some depth of flavor. So in a pressure cooker, you can start out by sautéing these items to develop some color and that associated flavor and aroma, okay, that comes with the browning. And then you can put your other items, the liquid and everything, in the pot, seal it up, and then cook it. Now, the big question is, how long do you need to cook it? So this is where some experimentation on your part is going to be necessary. I don't have the answer standing here. I would have to test the recipes to figure out what works based upon my equipment. And so you would need to do the same thing. Take notes. I recommend this in daily cooking for most people anyway, but certainly when you're testing a recipe, making a change to a recipe, such as a cooking method, have a notepad and your pencil and follow through as to, what timing is going to be best for the equipment that you're using, whether it's a stovetop pressure cooker or an electric pressure cooker with all these different buttons and different settings, and also the adjustability and the time. Okay. And, figure out what texture, what sort of finished product is going to suit what you have in mind. Okay, but that's going to very simply be those first couple of steps. Develop flavor through a dry heat cooking method, and then continue with your pressure cooking. But you need to find the balance on the time. Okay, that's necessary. Thank you. Okay, next up from Lily. What is the process of freezing tofu? How does it change the final texture? Do you cut the tofu before freezing or after? Okay, so the process is going to be to drain the tofu, and the tofu is typically going to be pressed. And so this is where a firmer style of tofu is going to be used. So probably a medium to something firmer versus something softer than that. You can sort of manipulate the tofu more easily without having it crumble in your fingers, okay, with these firmer styles of tofu. And you want to expel as much water as you can. Now, how does the final texture change? As water freezes, it expands. Okay, so the water in the tofu is going to expand and start to push apart the structure, okay, of the tofu. And so you're typically, I mean, at home, going to end up with something that's a little more delicate, when you thaw it, because of the work of the water through its freeze-thaw cycle. Okay, you can minimize some of that. I'll say damage, or maybe I shouldn't say damage, but that adverse change to the texture by eliminating as much water as you can. Okay, because that is the culprit here. And then do you cut it before or after? You can go either way, and just it depends on what you want to do and what you prefer. And as I like to say, give it a try and see how you like it. In a process like this, there's going to be some experimentation required on your part to find the type of tofu, the style of tofu that you like to use, and whether you want to cut it before or after, sliced or diced, and just what it is that you're going to use it in. In the end, will be part of that decision-making process as well. Thank you. Catherine says, when practicing good knife skills, it seems there's a lot of food waste. How can I balance the two? Yes, and so you just want to think about how you will use the scraps, the byproduct of knife cuts, knife skills. And I'm going to go back to what I talked about just a few minutes ago, and that is when you're practicing for, first of all, our graded assignments. Yes, we want you to create a dice or a nice long skinny thing that has 90-degree edges, which means there's going to be a lot of trim waste that's generated. In that case, figure out how you're going to use it. It can go into a stew, into a soup. You can make vegetable pancakes, or something else that you might come upon here. And now, beyond our graded assignments, right, you might decide that, oh, hey, for my routine daily cooking, I'm okay with having rounded edges on my cut pieces. So you can eliminate any of the trim waste by just cutting things up into approximately a large dice or a medium dice or a small dice or a brunoise, and then incorporating those things into your dishes, even though they are not exactly a cube, for example. Okay, totally up to you. Now, you might also decide that, okay, on occasion when I make a special meal, around this holiday or when this guest comes over, I will spend some extra time and really make those cuts look sharp, so that the finished dish looks really eye-appealing, in which case you will have some trim waste. And you just need to think about how you'll utilize those items, okay? And again, soups and stews are easy. Vegetable pancakes are another easy way to do that, a savory pancake. And then they can go into anything else that you might make, like a bean dish or some sort of a casserole. Thank you. All right, next up from Lynn. I have a recipe that calls for scalded milk, but I'm using almond milk. Do I need to scald the almond milk? The recipe is for custard. My quick answer is probably not. Yeah, I'd say probably not. And here, just give that a try, and I'm guessing that the results are going to be fine for you. Okay, thank you. All right, another question from Mitch, who says, could you please comment on the role of temperature as a dimension of flavor? For example, should salads be served cold or at room temp? What are some dishes more flavorful warm? Yeah, just very, very basically, if you think about heat, uh, heat generates more activity, like at the molecular level, so that there we perceive more flavor from warm food. And it's going to hit our nose first, or even internally once we put it in our mouth, right? Our olfactory senses, that bulb at the base of our brain is going to pick up a little more intensely, probably a little more quicker. Um, Molecules, these aroma molecules that are kicked off from warm foods. And so conversely, that same food, if it's chilled, will not taste as intense, or won't taste as good, we might say sometimes. Okay, so when it comes to a salad, I mean, you get to, I think of, negotiate, or just think about what's going to work best in terms of the combination of ingredients, and how that is perceived on the palate. And this is where I like to test out different combinations. And it might be a situation where the greens, for example, or the other ingredients that you're consuming feel the best when they're chilled or lightly chilled. But from a flavor aspect, maybe a room temperature dressing works best, so that when I bring these into combination, it kind of lifts the temperature a little bit. Or sometimes even a lightly warmed dressing might still feel a little bit warm on the palate, while the coolness of the ingredients on the palate created an interesting opposition or contrast when eating. So there are these different aspects, different perspectives that you can bring to the picture here. Okay, and if you are cooking with gosh, almost anything, but spices are a real obvious one, right? These dishes that are have spices, as we talked about a few minutes ago in today's program, are going to definitely be more flavorful most all the time that I can imagine when it's warmed up. And does it make it undesirable when it's chilled, or maybe a little bit? But if you bring it up to room temp, right, as that middle ground between hot and cold, then you might be able to find a satisfactory state of service that gives you some options on how you might prepare and serve this item. It can then be maybe carried as a picnic food, or brought to a party, or you might not be able to heat it up. But if it's at room temp, it's still enjoyable, certainly compared to when it's in its chilled state. So, should salads be served warm or at room temperature? Again, taste a tomato that's at room temp versus one that comes out of the refrigerator. Just compare those side by side, slice them and eat them, and then start to make that decision on your own. I think some answers will quickly emerge, and yeah, I think there's just a lot of beautiful experimentation that's required here, and I think it's enjoyable as well. So I hope you'll go forth with that, Mitch. Thank you. Okay, so Maria's asking, what's the next cooking class recommended after Forks Over Knives Ultimate? Our long class in the plant-based world is going to be our Pro Plant class, our professional plant-based certification course. And that's probably, closer to 8 months or so in duration. There's some overlap with FOK. Some of the foundational stuff is going to be the same. We go into more depth in these different areas, and we also cover some other additional areas of food preparation in that class. Okay. And then Kathy says, hello. I'm trying to replace plant-based butter in recipes with EVOO, extra virgin olive oil. Do you have any words of wisdom on how to make this exchange, equal amount or less EVOO, since it is a liquid? The quick answer is start with an equal amount. Okay. There are going to be variables depending on the type of olive oil you use and just its flavor profile, right? Some of them are smooth and buttery, and some of them are more astringent and peppery and leave a different sort of effect in the throat. And there's flavor profiles that vary. Some are grassy and some are fruity. Some are a little bit of both, depending on where on the palate and in the course of eating it you lie here. So you have to try it out. Okay. Again, I would have to try it out, but based upon your specific ingredients, your conditions, it's going to be best that you do it to understand what it is that you're trying to achieve. Okay. Thank you. All right, Miriam, I understand you help with course development. Any chance there could be a barbecue grilling smoking course? I've done some cool stuff with brisket and bacon, but I'd love a course on it. Thank you for the suggestion. I'm happy to jot that down. And, from time to time, my colleagues and I will talk about these sort of ideas and look ahead to the coming year or two to see what might be a best fit. And so I appreciate you sharing your idea, on a barbecue, grilling, and smoking course. Thanks. And let's see, Maria says, where can I find more recipes like the Asian wild rice salad? Do you have a cookbook you recommend? Plant-based Asian-inspired dishes? No, I don't have any cookbooks offhand to recommend. But what I do recommend for you is to use the Asian wild rice salad as a base, as a point of reference. And as you develop your skills and your knowledge around food and cooking, create your own. Start to dabble with global ingredients, global flavor profiles, that come from regional cuisines, and start to make your own variation of that base salad. That's what I do. That's what I suggest to our other students. And I think you can do this. Have fun. Thank you. And Ingrid says, how do you manage sherry wine? It's not a nice kind of wine to drink, but most of the recipes call for small amounts. Any tips? Well, I think I would disagree with you, Ingrid. I like my sherry, but I can understand if you don't prefer sherry. Sherry is an example of a fortified wine, which means it's got the addition of alcohol, originally used as a form of preservative. Anyway, it's become a different style of wine now. It's the different types of sherry as well. There are sweet versions, there are dry versions, and some in between. In terms of drinking, you might find something that you like in there. But in terms of cooking, most often you're probably using a dry, or maybe an off-dry variety, something that has lower sweetness to be compatible with savory preparations. Okay. And so how do I manage it? If it's something that you do not consume in a short period of time, then hold it in the refrigerator. That's going to maintain the greatest stability of the quality over the longest period of time. But do keep in mind that it still will decline over a period of time. It just slows the process. Okay. So you still need to figure out your usage rate. And at some point, if you really don't like it, then just throw it out and start over. Okay. Thank you. And let's see, the last question is going to be from Kelly, who says, this is a bit off topic, but I'm wondering about the Ayurvedic practice of oil pulling in relation to the FOK philosophy of no oil. Do we absorb the fat from the oil by swishing it in your mouth? I don't know what we absorb or how much we absorb of the oil that you choose when you're oil pulling, according to the Ayurvedic tradition. Um, but I mean, aside from that, the benefits, of using, for example, sesame oil. This is based upon a number of smaller scale studies done by Ayurvedic clinics and universities over the years. Does show that sesame oil. It doesn't have to be sesame oil, but I'm taking sesame oil as an example. That's what I use each morning as well. Does reduce bacteria count. So it does have that sort of a benefit within the mouth. And it's said to maintain the health of your throat in case you're a singer. It's said to be have some benefit. But yeah, as it relates to a no oil diet, can't comment on that. All right. Thank you very much for your very interesting question. And that brings us to the conclusion of today's program. I want to thank all of you for your participation today, and thank you for being in the audience if you were just listening in. And I look forward to seeing you again in the not too distant future. And until we meet, happy cooking.